The program today is sponsored by the Retirement Challenges and Opportunity Committee. And we are here today for the program with Evan Richards. Evan is retired from the UW-Madison Space Science and Engineering Center in 2006, where he had managed several of the NASA spacecraft instrument development programs, including the Hubble Space Telescope High-Speed Photometer, the Pioneer Venus Net Flux Radiatum, I can't even see it.
It's easy for you to say.
Yeah. And the Orbiting Solar Observatory Soft X-ray Instrument. He is a board member of the Association of Wisconsin Symphony Orchestras, webmaster and videographer for the Peninsula Music Festival, Door County, Wisconsin. And he's also a volunteer charter and dinner train manager for East Troy Museum Railroad. So please welcome Evan Richard.
Well, thank you, especially all of you who showed up today to be inside for this talk when you could be outside gardening or walking around or enjoying our wonderful spring weather. Today I'm going to reveal something that not a lot of people appreciate about an industry that came on the scene very quickly, was incredibly important in ways that most of the younger folks don't even realize existed, but really changed our lives dramatically and then faded away rather quickly. In addition to all the things about how it changed our life and our ability to travel and how we live, it also made possible the church supper. And I'll tell you how that happened a little later. I'm going to talk about the East Troy Railroad Museum today and why that's important. It's the only museum of its type in this part of the country. It's a piece of interurban line that still exists. It's the only original interurban line that still exists, and we run interurban cars on it. Very, very significant bit of history that you can experience over there. Well, let me start. The museum specializes in preserving the electric railroad. And first of all, what is an electric railroad and why is that important? Well, in the time after the Civil War, cities started to grow. And New York was the first place where it got bigger than what a person could walk to work or ride a horse to work. People, working people, didn't have a place to keep a horse, and they didn't have horse parking at work, so you were pretty much on your own. So in New York, as early in the 1820s and 30s, started having what they called omnibuses, which traveled around horse-drawn wagons, essentially, where people would pay a nickel and ride. But it was a pretty miserable ride because it was, there's hard wooden wheels, steel tires maybe on cobblestones at best, and maybe mud at worst, or planks. And it was a bone-chilling, bone-shaking, they were unheated, so days like today it would be rather unpleasant in lots of ways. So, the streetcar was invented, and that was originally horse-drawn. And that was pretty much a New York thing for a while. It didn't appear in our part of the country till about the 1840s 40s, 50s in Chicago. And they quickly found that if you put some rails in the street, you didn't have to pave the whole street, then you could have horse-drawn omnibuses, streetcars. Okay, and that worked great until about, well, not so great, because there's two problems with horses. You got to feed them and take care of them. And in the 1860s or 70s, 80s, there was an epidemic of a horse disease that wiped out a lot of them. This is about the same time that this fellow invented the wire rope, and they came up with cable cars. And actually, well, you all know about San Francisco cable cars. It's about the only one that still exists. So that was a replacement for horses, was the main motivation. But actually, Chicago had the biggest cable car system, almost 50 miles of track. And a fellow by the name of Yerkes bought up a lot of the lines. And he's the one then that converted them to electric-powered streetcars later on in the loop. Yerkes, you may recognize the name. He's the guy that, trying to clean up his image, funded Yerkes Observatory. Anyway, so first it was cable cars. Cable cars, kind of problematical. As you can imagine, especially in the Midwest, in weather like this, there's this thing under the street where the physical cable actually ran, and it was a nightmare to maintain. Fills up with water and snow and then turns to ice. It's a problem. It's also very expensive to build in the first place. You've got this cableway and all these pulleys and this arrangement for when cable lines cross, whose cable goes on top, and the cable operators have to remember to let go of the cable, and it's very complicated. So along about, 1890, late 1880s, there's a whole convergence of inventions that came together just at the right time. You had electric power. You had the big competition between Edison and DC and Westinghouse and AC. And Westinghouse showed that you could actually produce power at one location and transmit it long distances to be used at another location. Edison started with the lights and power plants in cities where the people that used it were close by and all that. But anyway, all these things came together where you could have a power plant in one place and use the power in another place. And the key invention was the traction motor, a fellow by the name of Sprague. All of a sudden, you could power these streetcars not with cables, not with horses, but something that was relatively easy to construct. You put a trolley wire with the 600 volts up above and use the same tracks that you had for the horse cars and the cable cars, and away you go. So in about 1890, this was coming on very strong. And so cities just had an explosion of streetcars. That got to be the urban transportation. I don't know, I've got some numbers here. There was another invention that came along about the same time as the traction motor. It's the internal combustion engine. And so there was this other mode of transportation. I don't think it'll ever amount to anything. But at least in the beginning, this is what you were dealing with automobiles. Lack of roads, and before Henry Ford solved the problem, they were very expensive. So there really wasn't a good alternative to the streetcars. Then somebody thought, well, gee, these streetcars work so great in town. How about we could connect towns? And so the interurbans started to blossom between towns. So they were essentially streetcars designed to be a bit more comfortable, a bit faster, and connecting up the various towns with usually focused around a big city. Then we had some railroads electrified portions of their line. Great Northern did. Out west, the Milwaukee Road was a pioneer. The Northeast Corridor still is electrified. So that's what we mean by electric railroad. Three kinds: streetcars, interurbans, and electric railroads. So that's what when we talk about electric railroads, that's what we're talking about. So we talked about a little bit of this. Streetcars rapidly expanded. When they started in 1890, they were everywhere. 26,000 miles of track, somebody figured out at their peak. And there were 60,000 of them or so running, with 11 billion passengers every year. So that was important for transportation. The last streetcar ran, I've given this talk before, and this slide did not have the last entry. I talked about the last streetcar disappeared in Milwaukee in 1958, which ironically was the number 10 Wells line, which was one of the first. When they laid that out and were planning it, that was planned as a cable car line, but they didn't get it done before cable started to fade and the streetcar was coming. So anyway, so in 1958, the last streetcar ran, number 10, Milwaukee. And that's all I could say about it until last November 1st, when streetcars returned to Milwaukee. It's called the Hop. And so after, little gap there of 60 years, I always, when we get to run, one of the surviving streetcars is over at our museum. It's a wonderful car. I love to run it. And I tell people, this is the kind of car I used to ride to County Stadium to see the Braves. And if you want to go to the ball game in this car, you're only about 60 years too late. But maybe it'll come back. Anyway, so that's streetcars. Interurbans. Just a little later than streetcars, but that was incredibly rapid also. 18,000 miles of track, 10,000 cars. The biggest network in Wisconsin was the Milwaukee Electric Railway and Light Company. It was a power company. It's now called We Energies. And they produced power and operated a network that spanned a pretty good part of southeastern Wisconsin, including East Troy. They reached their peak in 1908. They had big plans to make it even bigger. That never happened, but there was kind of a renaissance in the 20s when they did lots of improvements. They built a rapid transit line in Milwaukee so that the cars didn't have to come in on Forest Home Avenue, and reduced the travel time, for example, to East Troy to 1 hour and 8 minutes. So, which is better than you can do today, frankly, during rush hour. Abandonments started in Milwaukee Electric in 1939. Interurban mileage started to fade even before that in the Depression. But 39 was when the East Troy line was abandoned. And the last interurban lines in Wisconsin, the last TM interurban line was in the Milwaukee system, ended in 1951. And the last interurban in Wisconsin was the North Shore line, 1963. So it's been a while since they've operated. Now, I'm talking about the impact of the interurban now. It was kind of tough to get between cities. You saw the roads. people were kind of prisoners in their homes. If you lived in a small town or out in the rural areas on a farm. And before electricity came out to the country. In general, electricity wasn't widespread until, well, during Roosevelt's rural electrification program. But if you were lucky enough to be near an interurban line, then you had power. Power came out to East Troy in 1907, and they had a big celebration when they turned the streetlights on there in 1907. They had a band concert at on their square, and I saw the program for that. Milwaukee Electric had a band, and the last work on the program, this is how some things don't change, was Sousa's Stars and Stripes Forever. So you can't have a band concert without that, I guess. So before, you were isolated and you had oil lanterns, candles to light your house. The interurban comes and suddenly you can go where you want to go. You can go to Milwaukee in less than 2 hours. You can go to the next town. You can do this every hour and a half, 2 hours or so. 8 times a day, they had trips either way. You had lights, electricity. They even had Package Express. You could call Schuster's and order something. And we think we're so advanced. We have got Amazon Prime and Federal Express, and you can get stuff in a couple days. Well, here's the deal. The Milwaukee Electric had this arrangement so that if Schuster's or whatever the department store, whoever you ordered stuff in Milwaukee, if you got it down to their station in Milwaukee by noon, you'd have it the same day. Okay? 1908. And they were pretty advanced. Most interurban lines didn't have much to do with the steam railroads. But Milwaukee Electric made deals, and they were interchanging freight cars. And that turns out to be a very important fact for the survival of the peace between East Troy and McGuanago. So, you go from being isolated with no electricity to electric lights and appliances and being able to go. That was the coming of the interurban that did that. So, this is what that road, or a similar road, looks like. Here's your alternatives. You can drive on this road, or you can go up there to the crossing and grab an interurban. So you can see why the interurbans were very popular and successful. They typically did stop at road crossings, and the crews were very friendly. I was reading about this in a book that described kind of what the feel of the company and how interurban companies dealt with their passengers. The railroads were very formal. The train crews were very important people, and the passenger train stopped maybe twice a day, and these were very important people and so on. Kind of cold, officious. But the interurban guys, on the other hand, were very friendly. They would get to know their customers, and if they had regular riders, they'd often stop and check to see if somebody wasn't down there, what the deal was. And I like to tell our passengers out at East Troy that actually all our volunteers at East Troy who run these cars and interact with passengers are actually not very nice people, but for historical accuracy, we appear to be nice and friendly. So we're just doing that to be an authentic museum. But they were. It's interesting how it got to be traveling salesmen. That's what sort of started it, guys walking around with briefcases full of samples. That was facilitated by being able to get from one town to the other. This was the focus of the Milwaukee Electric, the public service building, downtown Milwaukee. That's Michigan Street over here and 3rd Street out here. And you can get on catch your interurban for wherever inside. The terminal was in the ground floor. And that's what the interurban looked like, say in the 20s out in the country. Milwaukee Electric had these distinctive waiting areas with the curves, and they were kind of neat. Anyway, that's one of the heavy interurbans on the way to East Troy. Here it is at East Troy. That building that looks like a house was the station in those days. They had a covered area there where that was the bus connection. The buses could take you on to Janesville and Beloit, and you could connect right here. Now, on that, couldn't resist a then and now. This was sometime in the 20s or early 30s, and this was a year ago. We got out our Minneapolis streetcar and parked it on that same spot. So, anyway, that was extremely rapid. It came and went. It went almost as quickly as it came. In the meantime, automobiles started up about the same time. And, well, I don't want to spoil it to tell you how this race came out. But anyway, here's a map that was on the back cover of the 1929 timetable. You can see the solid orange lines are the interurban lines. One south through Racine to Kenosha, one out southwest that split at St. Martin's, and one line went to East Troy, the other one to Burlington. One straight west through Waukesha, Conomowoc to Watertown, and then one north to Sheboygan. Now, all of these were intended to go further. They had some notions of going closer to Chicago with the Kenosha line at one time. The Burlington line was intended to go to Lake Geneva. Somehow the people who lived in Lake Geneva at the time weren't real enthused about having people from Milwaukee and Wisconsin down there. So they didn't encourage it. And about the time they got to Burlington, there was a financial panic that sort of stopped both the Burlington and East Troy lines where they were. Who would build a railroad to East Troy, right? So obviously the destination that they intended was they'd go down through Elkhorn to Delavan, and the dotted line is a bus connection that they had, but they were going to build a railroad down there, and then it split at Delavan to Janesville and Beloit. The Watertown line was intended to come to Madison, and that would have been, Madison is one of the biggest cities in the Midwest that never had an interurban. But they actually built some right-of-way out east of Madison. They were going to do it, but the finances never quite worked out, and by the time that they could work it out, then the automobile had taken hold, and they had bus connections and so on. So, anyway, here's a, don't expect you to read that, but this is the East Troy and Burlington page from the 1929 timetable. Here's the East Troy to Milwaukee half of it. You can see there were 8 trains every day. If you lived in East Troy, you could catch one at 6:21 or 7:17 to go into Milwaukee if you're commuting to work, so it was a viable commute. The travel time was an hour and 8 minutes, so not bad. Probably a lot less time than you spend on the freeway nowadays. And equivalent service coming back. And the other half of that timetable is is this, and notice on Saturdays and Sundays, there was an 11 o'clock departure from Milwaukee, so you could go in and go to concert, play, show, and get home in plenty of time. So it was something that people could use. The fare for much of the time the interurban ran, a one-way ticket was 65 cents from East Troy to Milwaukee. If you bought a round-trip ticket, you got a deal on it. It was only $1.25. It was a 5-cent discount. So you wanted to be sure to get your round-trip ticket beforehand. And now, it ran from 1907, when they started, to 1939. That line was abandoned in 1939. So, not a long time, actually. Okay. Church suppers. We got power, we've got mobility, we've got appliances. We also get church suppers. Okay, is there anybody in the room that has ever been to a church supper in Wisconsin where there wasn't a Nesco present? Right. Okay, so we can't have a church supper without a Nesco. Now, the Milwaukee Electric Railway and Light Company, so the power company and the electric company was all one company. In that public service building that we showed before, they had a wonderful auditorium. They had all kinds of events in there, including, notice the women, how they're dressed up on stage there. There's somebody demonstrating, you see the Nescos, how to use them. Nesco, National Enameling and Stamping Company. In 1935, their sales of their cookers was about 5,500 units. The power company, people didn't know. You can get lights. What else do you do with electricity? What do I need electricity for? So for a long time, they were promoting the use of electricity by making it easy for you to get appliances. So they would have deals every year. If you're a power customer, you could get, a toaster, a mixer, whatever. And in 1936, they started offering a Nesco. You could get it as part of, you pay for it with your power bill, some kind of plan. These sales went to 20,000 that first year. So it was the interurban.
What item was 20,000?
The thing we now call a Nesco, it's this covered cooker.
I'm new here.
Oh, okay.
I come from England, so I don't.
Oh, all right. Well, see, this is a kind of a Wisconsin thing. It's a cooker if you're having, baked beans or any kind of vegetable or ham, chicken. It's like, crock pot is very equivalent, that kind of thing. But anyway, it was the interurban that made that sort of widespread. And you could actually go to the church supper. You could get on the interurban, go to the next town, or at that farm crossing or whatever. Okay. The East Troy Railroad. Now, the reason we have it is that when the railroad wanted to abandon the East Troy line, and they abandoned it from Hales Corners all the way down Burlington and East Troy. The people from East Troy were really upset because there were several industries in East Troy that used freight cars that were interchanged with the Sioux line in Munkwonago. And the Milwaukee Electric had freight locomotives, electric locomotives, they call them freight motors in the interurban world, that would bring these cars down from Munkwonago to East Troy and other industries along the way. So people needed the freight service. So people were upset about two things. First, they didn't want to lose the interurban service. And they were really upset about the potential loss of the freight service. So when the Public Service Commission had the hearing in Waukesha, lots of people from East Troy showed up, and they were livid. Now, they made a slight tactical error. You could have taken an interurban to that meeting in Waukesha. You just connect through either West Junction or Hales Corners. And they drove. And that was pointed out to them by the people from the railroad. So they kind of lost that one, but they said, we really have to have this freight service. So the railroad's position was, okay, we'll sell you the railroad. You can buy it. $10,000, the railroad, the power overhead, the substations, a few of these electric locomotives, and some stuff, and a line car so you guys can maintain it and all this sort of thing. So, Village of East Troy had a referendum, and they bought it. So, they were running freight service from 1939 up until, I think it was 1995. Now, about, I think it's the early 70s, some trolley enthusiasts, as the interurbans were completely disappearing, they were trying to preserve the cars. They thought that, well, it'd be a great thing to have an interurban and streetcar museum, and so they started one at North Prairie, Wisconsin. There was a bit of abandoned railroad that they took over, and they were going to put up poles and everything. And finally, somebody said, hey, there's this line between Munkwonago and East Troy that still has the electric up and everything. Wonder if we could make a deal with them. So they talked with the village, and the village allowed them to bring their streetcars down the plot of land out close to where the Elegant Farmer is now, and operate on weekends, because they didn't do freight service on weekends. And so that's how the museum started. And over time, that collection grew. It wasn't all smooth, because the village and the museum, when the museum started using the tracks a lot, and their use got to be a maintenance issue, you know, who pays for the maintenance and who does that, and then the village eventually stopped using the electric freight motors, bought a little diesel, and, you know, well, we don't need the electric anymore. And, you know, anyway, that all came to a head in the early, that's about 1982. The village threw them out, told them to leave. But another traction museum came in, and that's the one that, to the outside world, if you visited East Troy, you'd visit in 1982 and they had some stuff, and visit in 1983, there was some other stuff, and but it was a different group. And so the current museum is the survivor of that second group. That was 1984. Okay. By 1995, the village freight business dried up, and they said they want to get out of it. And so by that time, there was enough people coming to the museum and enough support, and they bought the railroad. So now we own the railroad, the overhead, cars, everything. So that is nice. That's it's rather fraught when a railroad museum is operating on somebody else's tracks, and fortunately we don't. The good news is we don't have those kind of problems. The bad news is, of course, we have all of the expense of maintaining all that, and that's quite significant. So the line that we have now goes from East Troy, down here in the lower left, up to Munkwonago, which includes the connection to what was the Sioux line, where they interchanged freight cars. It's now the CN, which is one of the busiest railroads in the country, and we still interchange stuff when we need to have big, heavy-duty track maintenance equipment come in. It comes in off the railroad and gets on our railroad. So that's nice to have. So that's our line. The Elegant Farmer is on the line. We have lots of interesting events with them. They host our Christmas train. Santa's workshop is one of the Elegant Farmers greenhouses in Christmas time. And our bunny trains, you can meet the Easter bunny in their greenhouse. And so it's a good relationship, and they like having us because we bring them customers by the trainload, and not too many farm products places have that feature. And they do charter some of our cars for some of their events. So anyway, this is our sort of our timetable, and we've got the ride that you get when you come to East Troy is a 6-mile one-way trip. So it's a round trip of 12 miles. And that's a whole lot more than most railroad museums. So first of all, it's an original interurban line. And some of the pieces of it are really still original. That wire overhead is original. That is, before too long, is going to be a little bit of a problem for us because some of it needs to be replaced. And we've got quite a nice collection of cars and quite a bunch of cars that need to be restored, so work for the future. And we have a regular schedule and all kinds of other things, charters, special events, dinner trains. There's about, I don't know, if you say how many cars are running, you sort of need to put asterisks by almost anything you say. But the cars that are either in service or are down and for sort of routine or a little bit more than routine, but will be back and there's in the mix. There's 14 of those. In the last few years, we've had just under 25,000 riders. I wouldn't be surprised if that's more than the interurban line had at their peak. And we have offer regular service in 2019. It'll start on the weekend of April 27th. And then we also do Fridays during the peak of the summer from about Labor Day through September. September is a very, actually the entire fall is pretty busy, but Fridays in particular in September are busy. And we have a lot of special events. Bunny trains starting in April, just before Easter. And those, very popular, and we sell reserved seats, and they generally sell out, as do the Christmas trains. And we have other events. We've got a Rail Fan Day, a Chicago Day, a Milwaukee Day, and a night photo shoot. And those are very popular with with everybody, because the special days like Railfan, Chicago, and Milwaukee, we tend to operate just about everything that's running. Normally, on a operating day, Saturday or Sunday, Friday, one train will get out there and do 3 or 4 runs. And most weekends, we have 2 trains, and they'll be running opposite each other. But on the Railfan weekends, one piece of equipment will go out, do a round trip. The crew in the yard will get another one prepped, so the next train goes out is a different piece of equipment. So you can see more of our equipment on those special days. And we do charters. So we have 2 basic kinds of charters. The regular charters where we're not serving meals. And you can do, they're great for birthday parties, anniversaries, just outings with your friends. Get a lot of school charters in the spring and in the fall when the weather's really nice. We've got a couple of parks online, and kids just love it. And we can do these charters any day of the week, so we're usually pretty busy with charters during the week. And then we have our dinner trains. We have scheduled dinner trains, and those tickets are by reservation. We can only seat 100 people on our dinner train, 2 cars of 50 each. And we've got very family-friendly and low-cost outings. We have some rather formal dinners, be the very adult and excellent food, by the way. And then this year, something new. We're having a very, very special dinner for our final run. And other things like beer tasting trains. And there is a bar. And anyway, here's a school charter. I don't know if this is a preschool or kindergarten, I forget. But boy, there's nothing more fun. I just love these charters. These kids have so much energy. You can just see how excited they are. I joke with people, I say, you know, you don't even have to put the trolley pole up. There's so much energy in that car, you can just run it with. But here they are. That's our Minneapolis streetcar. That's one of very few that have survived. I only know of 3 that are operating. 1 here and 2 up in Minnesota Museum. Now this one is, well, this is my favorite car. This is number 26, the Sheboygan Power and Light. It ran from Sheboygan to Elkhart Lake starting in 1908. It's a wooden interurban. There are not many wooden interurbans that survived, and fewer of them are operating. And well, this is such a combination of rare things. This interurban actually operated in Wisconsin, so you can still ride a wooden interurban in Wisconsin on a real interurban track. Try to find that any place. Let me know if you find one. You won't. This car was a lake cottage after the interurban line quit from Sheboygan to Elkhart Lake. But they took rather good care of it. So a lot of the inside, the wood was in pretty good shape. And it was oak, most of it's oak, so it held up rather well. But then when the owner died, the children of the owner realized the value of that car, the historic significance of it. The city of Elkhart Lake offered them a significant amount of money for it, and they were going to put it on rubber tires and make a trolley out of it and drive it around Elkhart Lake. Guy turned him down, a fellow by the name of Doden. And his vision was he wanted that to run again and be restored to its original appearance. So he raised about $250,000 and spent 10 years finding the right people. You'll see those red leather seats. There's not too many. That's what it was, the original, to rebuild something like that and make it like it was. The interior there were some pieces missing, and it all had to get operating again. There's stained glass windows in those upper, above the square sashes. Some of those were missing, some of them were broken. They found the original manufacturer. He's still in business. They could order the same thing. So, yeah, that's the kind of thing that went into this. It's a rolling piece of art. Here are some kids, school charter, but you can see that those stained glass windows, and to see that thing at night lit up inside, it's amazing. I get all weepy just thinking about it, and I'd love to drive that car. So, if you want to have that experience, let's have a charter, and I'll be your motorman, and we can have some fun. Let's see. Yeah, another school group. We get a lot of rail fans. This is the the National Railway Historical Society Wisconsin Division, Wisconsin chapter. A couple of years ago, we asked them what they want. Well, they wanted a 2-car South Shore train and some photo opportunities, so we tailor it to the needs of the group. So they like to get off the train, have the train go back a ways and then come roaring by so they can take photos and videos. And we also carefully plan the locations and the sun angles so it works out great for pictures. So we have a lot of fun with the rail fans. They also kind of like the historical connections. Now the photo in the lower right is a picture that was taken in Milwaukee after the last North Shore train came in for the last time in 1963 in January. Motorman there is holding the headlight, and the rest of the train crew is holding the lanterns. They wanted to sort of get something similar, so the best we could come up with had the motorman, my brother there, he's holding the headlight, and I'm holding the marker lamps. So anyway, we do what we can. Then the same group came back this last summer and wanted to go on our spur that we never run passenger service on, so we got that cleaned up for them. And they loved this picture because that was the jacket photo on the definitive book about the Milwaukee Electric. TM, Central Electric Rail Fan, Publication 112, the Bible. Anyway, yeah. Okay. It's not the same, but it's kind of suggests, and that's our Milwaukee streetcar. This is our dinner train. These are 2 cars, South Shore interurban cars, built in the 20s in Chicago by Pullman, and modernized during the World War II days. The traffic just got to be crazy on railroads because tires and everything was rationed. And so the traffic went through the roof, and you couldn't buy new interurban cars because guess what? Pullman Company was building, tanks and war material. So they took the 60-foot interurban cars they had, cut them in 2, added 20 feet in the middle, and made longer cars. And some of them they put in these bigger windows and air conditioning and all that sort of thing. So we've got 2 of them. They came to the museum a long time ago in the 80s. These cars ran from the 20s through the 80s in Chicago, between Chicago and South Bend. And the museum turned both those 2 into dining cars, and they are quite nice. That's our diner set up for lunch or dinner. We've got a wonderful caterer. Man, the food is great. And well, maybe I should explain to you.
Kitchen right on the car?
Do we have what?
Kitchen right
No,
on the car?
no, we don't have a onboard kitchen. But the caterer has a kitchen very close, and so the food can get there hot. So I should tell you, I'm the dinner train manager, so but it is good, if I do say so myself, and I do. And there's historical precedent for interurban dining. The Milwaukee Electric had one between Watertown and Milwaukee, or Kenosha, Milwaukee, and Watertown. There it is. It did not survive the Depression. There wasn't dining service on the Sheboygan or the East Troy Burlington lines, but there it is. The South Shore line had diners. They put, this again before the stock market tanked in '29, they built 2 really nice diners so that they could run those in with parlor car trains. So they had two, because one would leave Chicago, one would leave South Bend in the mornings for breakfast, and then they'd be at the other end of the line, so then they could leave each end for lunch, and then dinner. So they did breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 3 trains a day, and they did it with 2 diners. Those 2 diners ran for several years, and this is the neat part. There are people at the museum that insist this is true. I think it's almost too good to be true, but it's such a great story. Let's assume that it's true, because these guys wouldn't exaggerate anything. When the South Shore Line decided to lengthen those cars, they took cars that were sitting around and took parts out of them to use for lengthening. Those 2 diners were sitting in storage just before that and were used for that lengthening process. So it is likely that our diners have some parts in it from the original South Shore diners. Okay. Can't prove it, but it's feasible. And the North Shore Line had dining service. Actually, their diners lasted until the end of service. This was the conventional one in the 1920s style. But when they built those 2 electroliners, some of you may remember the electroliner, had a tavern lounge, and you could get food service, and that soldiered on to the very end, and the specialty item was the Electro Burger. Now, I just was given the job of managing the dining cars on our railroad just this past fall. And we have 2 burger trains, kind of a more informal event. I think we should call it the Electro Burger, don't you? All right.
Are you going to compete with those cars?
I'm sorry about that. But yeah. We also do, I don't know if you remember Milwaukee, a long time ago, they had the Christmas parade train. Schuster's had a parade. They did it with streetcar equipment on streetcar tracks. And there was a radio program, Billy the Brownie. Anybody from Milwaukee in those days? Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, so they'd hype up the kids on this radio program. You can see Santa Claus, you can see Billy the Brownie. And so you'd talk your parents into taking you to see the parade, which I did a few times. And it was fun. So what we try to do is, it's sort of a nod to that tradition. We have a Christmas parade train that brings Santa Claus and people that want to ride the train from the Elegant Farmer to East Troy. And Santa then is met by a fire engine at East Troy and is taken to the square where they light up the Christmas tree. So we do that every year. This past year was kind of difficult. We had a delay in the regular service toward the end of the day, and we were on kind of a tight schedule to get that all done and put away and stuff rearranged for the Christmas train. It was a thunderstorm. Thunderstorm in December, please, you remember that? And then we had a lot of rain, so the crowd wasn't very big, but this was a couple of years before, and we have one of the freight motor, L8, all lit up. Santa Claus is on the flat car, and then there's a caboose behind that, and then several passenger cars. So it's the biggest train we operate every year. It's a big deal. It's a lot of fun. We have a guy in the substation to reset the fuses and the breakers because it's way more power than we should be pulling. So anyway, there's Santa Claus. Yeah, it's that can be brutal. So, and here's our on one of our special events days when everything that we have that rolls is out there and ready to go. This is from one of the night photo shoots where we lit this thing up and parked a bunch of our South Shore cars, and even got one of our volunteers to stand there for a long time looking at his watch. Here's another year. Lauber's Ice Cream Parlor is right next door to us, and that's a trip into the 50s, just walking in their door. The guy that owns it, John Lauber, is also a Studebaker collector, so he'll park appropriate period car out in front, so it makes for some nice pictures. Anyway, so it's a volunteer organization. We've got, well, now I think it's about 140 volunteers. We do have a heated maintenance facility, which is rather new, which is nice because we can actually do work. Last Saturday I was helping restain in preparation of revarnishing the window frames on car 26. Took the windows out, and they hadn't been touched since the mid-'80s. And we've got the East Troy barn where we keep the cars that are running and for the day-to-day maintenance, and there's another barn up there near the Elegant Farmer for cars awaiting restoration. This is what it looked like in 1907. You can just see to the left of the interurban car the substation, which is now our depot. This is Division Street in East Troy, and I couldn't resist making a then and now. Parked the car there, and Lauber's wasn't built in 1907. There was no building there. That is the substation. It's now our depot. The substation originally had rotary converters, which is an AC motor on the same shaft as a DC generator. The Milwaukee Electric was rather innovative. They automated it, so it saved labor. It would automatically sense the need to turn itself on, and if there was no load, it'd turn itself off. We use that as our depot now. This is the station at the Elegant Farmer. The Phantom Woods barn is off to the right there. This is the maintenance facility. That's back a year or so ago when we had one of the diners in there. We were replacing some windows and doing there's new curtains, repainted the ceiling, did a lot of things. So that's what keeps us busy and allows us to have fun all winter. This is an original Milwaukee Electric piece of equipment, the line car, D23. That's got a platform on top, which you can raise and lower, that we use to work on the line. And you can actually run the car from up there if you need to. Pretty neat piece of equipment. This is a recreation of an open car that was built by a museum back in the 80s. It's called Bucky. It has nothing to do with the University of Wisconsin mascot, but everything to do with the ride quality of a single truck car on our railroad. So this is what it looks like inside. That's a great car for a beautiful day. There's Burn Park, popular spot for our school charters. Minneapolis streetcar sitting there. Nice playground and picnic area, Burn Park. There's 26 down at Indian Head Park. That's another place, but nice. There's even a beach down there. And there's 26. You can see that stained glass a little better. Oh, yeah, that's a people catcher. That was, these cars ran on the streets in Sheboygan and Kohler, Sheboygan Falls. And what happens if you are standing and this thing hits you, the idea is to fall into that mesh, the wire, the metal cradle, then that collapses down and will hold you in there. You know, it slopes the other way. Well, it's better than being run over by the streetcar, right?
They used to call them cow catchers, and they really had them on it.
Well, that's,
On the local.
well, that's a little different device.
The cow.
But yeah, this one is not quite designed for a cow. But, yeah. And we've got some pieces of Chicago elevated equipment from the 20s. That, by the way, is also built by the Cincinnati Car Company, just like 26 is, slightly later. This is one of the South Shore cars, one of the long ones. That one seats 80 people, so, and it's really fun to run these things in the snow when the plows leave these things next to the roads. Just go right through it, just like it doesn't exist. It's great. There's one of the 60-footers in its original condition. There's 13 out there. This is the meet at Army Lake. Well, anyway, I think that is it. If you want to pursue this, there's some really good books. The whole thing about Edison and his DC versus Westinghouse and AC and Tesla and everything, that book by Jill Johns, it's paperback, it's wonderful. And it's one of the few things, I'm an electrical engineer, and it's very rare to find a book that's written for the general public that really gets the details right and uses the right terminology and the right units, you know, and it's wonderful, and it's a page turner. It's really great. That whole battle between Westinghouse and Edison and how that played out with Westinghouse winning the contract to light the World's Fair. About the same time, Sprague had this traction motor that was demonstrated with the Intramural Railroad at the World's Fair. It's just amazing stuff. The other one I'd recommend is the Grant's, that's a fairly new book, Indiana University Press, and it's not so much the geeky railfan kind of thing, but what did the interurban do to change people's lives? How did that really change how people lived and worked? And it's fascinating. A lot of nice insights in that one. But if you want to get into the railfan stuff, Middleton has two good ones about the trolley, Time of the Trolley, and the interurban era classics. But there, again, is the Bible for the Milwaukee Electric. All the other interurbans in Wisconsin, except for the North Shore line, are in another SERA publication, Central Electric Railfans, Badger Traction, including the streetcar lines in Madison. So the library has this. And then the North Shore and South Shore lines, Middleton again has some really wonderful books. And if you really want to get into the weeds with details of other interurbans, he's got a series of 3, and they're a little hard to find and get because the first, well, they're all titled Traction Classics. The next line is the interurbans. So you go 2 deep, and volume 1, 2, and 3 have different kind of third title. The wood and steel, the great wood and steel cars, extra fast, extra fair, and interurban freight. But anyway, they are, you can find them on Amazon and probably at the library. I should stop. I think I have a reading list that was passed out, lists all this. And
There's a recent book about Edison Westinghouse, Last Days of Night or something.
yes,
What do you think of that?
that,
Pretty exciting book.
it is. That's kind of a fictionalized a little bit, right?
Yeah, it's called a novel.
Right. And the person that wrote that, I believe, well, that's what's, I read that, and it is good, and it's interesting. But it does kind of fictionalize some of the bits about Tesla and some of the details. And the guy said in there, I think he recommended the Johns book, if you really want to read all about this. And the Johns, I think, is, if you're going to read one, I'd read the Johns. But yeah, it's the same, that story is amazing. And both of them highlight Tesla's role. What a character. Yeah.
How do you, first of all, how many people do you employ to the museum? Or is it all volunteer? And how do you raise the money for whatever it is you have to do for the museum?
It's mostly volunteer. We've got someone that does some office work. We pay them a little bit. And of course, we have to pay for things. Sometimes there's a guy who was a member of the museum that just happens to own one of the major railroad track maintenance companies in the region. How handy is that? It's Volkman Brothers. And we're in touch with him all the time. And we've got a program now where we're replacing 10,000 ties a year. I'm going to do that for the next 10 years to keep up the railroad. And if there's anything that breaks, and it does, and we can't fix it, hey, Volkman, and he'll bring his stuff down. And
Power from the cars drawn from the general electrical system in southeastern Wisconsin?
yes, we have okay, the question is the power for the railroad drawn from the power in southeastern Wisconsin? Well, it always has been. It was We Energies in the early days, and it was these rotary converters in the original substation, which is now the depot. We're not operating those rotary converters. We have one left. You can see it there. But the substation that we use now is a solid state, silicon rectifier. It's a small building. It's about halfway between the two ends of the line. It's at Army Lake, and power comes in there.
Convert the AC to DC?
Yes.
Operate
Yes, yes. But it's easier to do that now with solid state. Yeah, good question.
Two questions. One is, did the interurbans contribute to the development of suburbs and the whole idea of commuting from a suburb to the city for work? The second question is, these must have been pretty quiet and smooth rides. Did they also have a good reputation for timeliness and reliability?
Yes, to all of your questions. If you look at that map of the Milwaukee Electric, then look at a map of the interstate highways. The Highway 894, 94 through Milwaukee was built right on the interurban rapid transit right away. You can see the towers as you go down past Miller Park, the cemetery, Soldiers Home. That's interurban right away. There are parts going out as far as Waukesha till it diverges. So yes, East Troy became a place that a lot of people lived. The population exploded when the interurban came. Ditto Munkwanego, Hales Corners, Waukesha. All the cities up the coast, Lake Michigan shoreline to Sheboygan, Port Washington. That's why the inner parts of the system lasted past the 30s into the 50s, because it was commuting and people going downtown. I remember that. I rode that, we lived out in West Allis and ride downtown, and just great memories. Just when you come over that hill, where about 60th, you start down the hill, you're going down towards the stadium and then across the Menominee Valley. Well, there was a stop at Soldiers Home, and the trains we would ride would be kind of local service. And it was just glorious. In the summertime with the windows open, you could hear the traction motors and everything. You come over the top of that hill, and you just hope there's nobody waiting and nobody wanting to get off, which was usually the case in the middle of the day. And you'd hear that controller. And the motors would whine, and you would be going 80 across that bridge down. And it wasn't the high bridge, the number 10 streetcar. It was across the, and you'd be just really moving. Next stop was 27th Street, from 60th to 27th, and no time. And then the big thing after that was, what was it? Well, the 16th Street, and then down around there, the Red Star Yeast plant. Do you remember that? It had a very distinctive smell, to say the least. And that just is burned into my memory. You get a whiff of that. It was wonderful. And that interurban car would just be pedal to the metal till there was a temporary wooden trestle that brought it up to the street just before the stock market crash in the 20s. They had started to build a subway between that private right-of-way and the public service building. The idea was the interurbans were going to be in the basement. There would be a subway. So that would have cut, another 5 minutes or so off the line. So you'd be going, and a guy would have this controller just to the pin, and then you could hear him about a half a block away from that ramp, just wrap it back around, shutting off. He'd coast up that hill. The grade would just slow him down to the right speed to get that curve to get back on Clyburn Street. Glorious. And the reverse, when you making your way through the streets and you get out there and you wrap that thing and down that ramp and bang, and instantly you're going 80 miles an hour. Wow. Yeah, anyway, I miss it. Yeah, so, and reliability, yes. Their timekeeping was good. That was what it was all about. And you wouldn't cancel service for weather like this. You just get out there, suck it up, get the plow out, and go. Yeah.
I rode on the South Shore line in 1962 and 63 from Indiana to work in Chicago, and rode the electric train every day to it from Chicago. And it was very timely. I mean, you could set your watch to the time. The only problem is in winter, if you had an ice storm and you got ice up on the wires, that would sometimes delay the train. I don't know how they ever cleared that ice off those wires, or whether
A lot of times.
the train through, or somebody had to manually do it. I'm not sure how they ever got the ice off, but that was only very infrequently, maybe a couple times a winter.
Yeah. I ride the North Shore a lot between Milwaukee and Chicago. I talked my parents into allowing me to go down there when I was in high school on Saturdays, So that was a thing I did a lot. And a couple of times there were ice storms, and it's just a spectacular light show, at night. Amazing, yeah. That was fun. But they just, at least in the storms I was in, they just keep going. I tried to get the electroliner. There was a seat in the front, the window that looked out the front. I always try to get that seat, and usually could. You move a little faster when you're in junior high school than as an adult, right? So on those night trips back from Chicago, in fact, we did it enough, some friends of mine and I, we got to know the crews a little bit. And we're always bugging the guy, how fast can you go? How fast can you go? Well, one night we were out there, it was a nice, clear, cool night. And I don't know, somehow it was a function of the voltage and everything. There was a speedometer on the electroliner. The other South Shore, North Shore equipment does not have speedometers, but electroliner did, speedometer. One night he flipped the door open. The motorman's cab was right across from this front seat. Flipped the door open. He says, "How we doing?" He pointed to the speedometer. 104 miles an hour. Yep. That was on that good Skokie Valley part of the line. They could really go. Yeah.
When you said they cranked it down, I got the impression that freewheel, but it wasn't freewheel, right? When you take an electric motor and you crank it down, wouldn't you have automatic braking to slow you down so that when you speed up and slow down, it would be real tight control? You're not freewheeling like with a gas engine?
Well, you're talking about technology that came along a little later. Like in your hybrid car, you take your foot off the gas, you're generating and using braking and stuff. And the railroads did use that, the big freight railroads out west, where you take power off or use regenerative braking and put power back into the system. The standard K controllers and the braking system are two different things. So that, yeah, when you would take power off of the motor, when you go back, you shut off is the term. Yeah, you're just coasting. Yeah. Yeah, it's an air brake. Well, actually, left hand for the controller, right hand for the brake. So yeah, apply, release, lap. Yeah. Oh, it's so much fun operating those things. Oh God, that's fun. I have way too much fun. You guys do a charter, and we'll have a little seminar on how it works and all that stuff. That's what we do with the kids when the school groups come and they're planning a picnic and all these activities, and then it's pouring rain. The teachers are going, "Oh, what are we going to do?" I said, "Not to worry. We'll have Interurban 101 or Streetcar 101, and we'll have the kids come up and we'll show them how it works, and they love it. We always have a good time. Doesn't matter if it's raining or not."
That system has the same limitation as grade, that you couldn't go more than 3% grade?
Well, yeah, 3% is probably, with an electric motor, you've got so much torque at the low speeds. The streetcars were in town were, oh, the cable cars, yeah, those grades are way more. But yeah, for the railroads, for a steam railroad, 4% is about as much as you ever want to see, and that's hard. Yeah, so 3 is, 2 is better, but electric, they're really not as sensitive to grades, although in this part of the country, except in town, where you're going up a steep hill or something on the streetcar. But yeah, that grade that I mentioned in Milwaukee, going from their private right-of-way up to the street, was about a half a block. It went, they had no problem with that. And of course, going up it, they were trying to slow down usually when they're coming into town, and they're trying to accelerate out of town, so they used the grade to work for them. But even from a stop at the bottom of that, they wouldn't have had any trouble at all. I won a bet that one time about that with the speed torque curves of steam engines versus electric motors. We were on a fan trip, and some guys were diesel engine guys, and we were on the Sioux line up near Fond du Lac, coming south out of Fond du Lac. There's a hill, and it was raining. It was terrible, and this was Milwaukee Road 261 steam engine. We had to stop. I was working a dining car at that time, just for fun, and these railroad guy said, "Oh, hey, you can't stop me. I'll never get this train going again." And, well, that may be true for a diesel because the speed torque curve is a little different. And so I had a little discussion with them. I said, it was the maitre d' of the dining car. I said, well, I beg to disagree with you, sir. I think you will find that we'll start just fine, and actually by the time we get to the top of the hill, we'll be probably going over 50 because, and they go, oh, no, it's not going to, no, he's not. I said, well, okay, how much, So they get the wallets out, we're putting the money, big pile of money on the table. It was a bet. Okay, let's see. So not long after we started up, so I was out at the end of the car looking out the window, waving to the people at the top of the hill as we're cruising by at least 70. We were really cruising. So went back to the table. Gentlemen, it's been a real pleasure. Yeah, and I said to him, you guys have great experience on a diesel, but the speed torque curve of a steam locomotive is exactly opposite the diesel. So, yeah.
How much is a standard ticket for a 12-mile run?
I think it's about $12.50, something like that. A group rate is 10. Charter rate. For a charter, our minimum charter price is $25 or $250. So, and we charge $10 per adult for a charter. So that's, you can have. We have had smaller groups. Just if you're happy with 15 people paying $250, that we run it. We've had as few as 3 people for a charter. It was a friend had died. They wanted to put ashes at various places. So, anyway. Get group.
Capital Lakes here, we rarely get more than 10 people on an excursion, but we have to recruit people from elsewhere.
You can't get 25 people to ride a train? What's right?
Some of us are very enthusiastic about these trips. A lot of activities here.
Okay, well, you can request car 26. We can seat 42 people comfortably in car 26.
You can go with just one car.
Oh, yeah, 26 goes by itself, And, tell them you want me as a motorman, and we'll do 26, and we'll have a grand time. 26 is just it's a gorgeous car to drive. I just love it. Drives itself, really. I just kind of feel like I'm standing there and just willing it to go, and it goes. And wonderful car. They don't build them like that anymore. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay, Evan, thank you for your presentation. And on behalf of the University Retirement Association,
Oh.
you get an umbrella.
Well, thank you. Wow.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me.